Sawati Krab. Pasatai Nitnoi. So I apologise, you have to put up with my English presentation today and my Australian accent. So I work with Gartner, and our role is as an independent advisor and researcher. We advise government, we advise business, and we advise around the implications of technology, digital strategy, leadership changes, how business models are affected by technology and this whole digital phenomenon, as well as helping people implement, to choose and deploy technology. And it's my privilege personally to work in the Southeast Asia region within ASEAN, in Thailand and other countries, working with both government and private sector around these sorts of challenges. So, what's digital? If I asked each of you to say what you think digital means, I'd probably end up with 100 different definitions. It's a buzzword. Everybody talks about digital. Digital economy, digital society, digital government, digital business. And it does mean many different things. So how do you make sense of that? Chung, elephant. Everybody loves elephant. So let me suggest that digital is like an elephant. Not just because it's a big thing, or that you have to be agile and balance, but think about the story of the 3 blind men and the elephant. One day, 3 blind men who never knew what an elephant was, they go to the elephant camp, and they asked, would you like to meet the elephant? Sure. The first blind man, he comes to the back and gets the tail. And he says, an elephant is like a rope. I know what an elephant is now. It's flexible and I can tie a knot. The second blind man, he gets the leg. So he says, I know what an elephant is. An elephant is like a tree. It's round and it's strong. The third blind man, he gets the trunk. And he says, I know what an elephant is. An elephant is like a water hose. It's strong and thick, but I can bend it and water comes out. Which one is right? They're all right, but they all have only part of the picture. And so digital, whether it's digital government or digital anything else, is actually about a lot of different things. And it's important when you're looking at, mobile apps for citizen service, when you're looking at the G-Cloud, when you're looking at different aspects, you realize that that's one part of a much bigger picture. So I'll leave that thought with you. A consumer example, just to make you smile, hopefully. Who has a baby? I can't actually see your hands, it's too bright. My children are grown up, so when I was a father with babies, we didn't have this. But Huggies, who produce the diapers, the nappies, now offer a device called a Tweet P. It's a little blue bird that attaches in the front of the nappy, and it detects moisture. And it will send a message to the parent's smartphone to say, hey, I think your baby needs changing. When I was a father, I have to pick up my baby and smell. Does it smell bad? I need to change. Now, this is an example, a consumer example, but an example of the Internet of Things, connecting the nappy to the parent with a messaging. Very simple, but it's an interesting idea maybe to make you think around how simple some of these things can be, but useful if you're a parent. Another consumer example before I jump to government. Volvo have this notion of the connected car. So the car has, GPS navigation, it can get real-time traffic information, you can stream internet YouTube videos for the kids in the back seat. You can now, if you have a new Volvo, you can use your smartphone to unlock the car. So Volvo says, let's reimagine then what a car can be. If I can use a digital key to unlock my car, why not allow my online shopping to be delivered to my car, and I will let Tesco use a one-time digital key to open the trunk of my car, put in my shopping, and when I go home from work, I already have my shopping in the car. That's a simple idea that they're piloting in Sweden. Will it work? Who knows? But they're reimagining the role of a car, not just to drive, not just to be entertained, but as a potential shopping delivery point. Now to government. As I drove my Volvo car to work in the morning, if I live in Boston, I can use an app smartphone app called Street Bump. When I start my journey, I log into the app, turn it on, I put it down beside the gear shift or on the dashboard. As I drive along the street, if I hit a pothole in the road, the accelerometer in my smartphone registers there's a bump in the road. It knows my location because it's got GPS, and it will send a message to the City of Boston to register that bump and that location and the time that it happened. Now, if I just run over a cat, sorry if you're a cat lover, if I run over a cat and you know, then it runs away, that's only one, that won't count. But if 100 people register a bump in the same place, the city can send out the maintenance crew to investigate and fix, you know, repair the road. It's interesting because they're using the citizen's technology, the smartphone. They don't have to go and put lots of sensors in the road. They're using the citizen technology. They're connecting from a social point of view. They're engaging with their citizens to help improve the services. They're connecting that with their workflow around scheduling the crews and making them you know, mobile and improving the service delivery. A very simple example and a very small piece of the bigger smart cities kind of initiative that they're doing. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, in his election campaign, the BJP, the political party he represents, had a very digitally enabled election campaign. They used a lot of social media, they had a whole lot of apps, they had people that went to the opposition rallies to find out what their key messages were, and they used a lot of you know, connections and to update Modi before his next speech so he could sort of react to those things. One of the really cool things up in the top is they actually used 3D holographic images of Modi so that he could reach a number of communities. I think in the biggest case, they broadcast him in a holographic image to 100 different locations as he was giving one of his big speeches. Much more powerful than just showing a video on the screen, having a 3D image. Now, I can assure you I'm not a holographic image, I'm real. But to have a holographic image in 3D is a bit more engaging for the audience and connects with the community as he's delivering his speech and encouraging people to vote for him and his policies. So that's a public sector, you know, political example around the power of thinking creatively about what technology can do for you. Now, they had a whole lot of other, you know, activities around that as well, and we don't have time to go into the detail. 4 quick little examples around aspects of what digital could be. Let's step back then from the detail, and I'll do this a few times, some examples and some frameworks. Gartner have this model of the nexus of forces. We talk about 4 mega trends: social, mobile, cloud, and information. Some people talk about analytics or big data. Each of those is significant, but it's when you combine them together that you get real power. The City of Boston had a mobile app. They engaged the citizens in using it. They provided information about road maintenance needs. They ran that over, you know, their infrastructure, cloud-type infrastructure, to put that all together to empower new things they couldn't do before. At the centre of the digital government piece is around some of the aspects of the role of government. How do you engage the citizens to both understand the services and deliver services? How do you connect across agencies and with private sector partners? Healthcare is a great one. Government hospitals, private hospitals. How do you connect across that in terms of overall healthcare? But how do you connect, you know, law enforcement, transport, national security? And then the resourcing. How do you provide the infrastructure? How do you improve the efficiency? G-Cloud, government data centre, government information network. And then at the centre, there's a whole lot of the policy and the regulation role of government. So here's a kind of, you know, one of the frameworks that we find useful to talk to people around this so-called nexus, this combination of megatrends with government and its different roles at the centre. When we talk about digital, the nexus has been around a long time. The new thing that's adding complexity and opportunity is the Internet of Things. So the nexus is these 4 trends: the Internet of Things adds another dimension. So that's where we connect the physical world with sensors, with cameras, machines being connected, providing data, providing services, and a much richer set of opportunities. So in the Gartner model of digital business, it's about connecting the virtual world and the physical world in new ways, creating new sources of value, creating new revenue if you're a commercial company. What does that mean for government? How will the digital industrial economy, as we refer to it, affect citizen expectations? So as the citizens bank, or their private hospital, or their retail experience is changed through this, even as they drive their car is changed through this, what will be their expectations when they come to government that you behave in the same way? Is digital business different from e-business? Is digital government different from e-government? And I'll come back and touch on that. And do these trends affect all governments equally? So if I take the digital business, virtual and physical, that definitely applies to government. And the street bump in Boston is an example, connecting the physical infrastructure of a city with a mobile app with the information to improve services. Government designed and operated to take advantage of digital data in optimising, transforming and creating government service. And the highlight there is around the data. And I'll come back to that as well. So the focus now is around the data. We've got new sources of data, we've got new tools to manipulate and manage and to join up and to get insights from the data. So the data is really the key to this in the future. Let me just underline the Internet of Things, because we see this as a fundamental shift in this, what we call in digital industrial revolution. Connecting up street signs, or video cameras, or health machines, or your house. Go back 5 years, there were more personal devices, computers, smartphones connected to the internet than there were independent machines. If you go forward 5 years, we see that flipping over, and there will be many more independent things. Machines, in manufacturing, vehicles, street lights, all sorts of things that will be connected without people directly involved, as well as a huge growth in the number of personal devices. A few quick examples just to give you a flavour of that. What will that look like? It could be toys, it could be vehicles, it can be personal medical monitors, health and lifestyle monitors that people wear, smart pills. At the other end, street lights, ATM machines are an example of that, although they've been around for a while. Many, many different things will be connected to the internet. The chair that you're sitting in could be connected to the internet with a sensor to tell you you've been sitting there too long and you should get up and get some exercise. Almost anything you can imagine as sensors become cheap can be connected to the internet. What does that mean for government? So, let's look at a couple of quick examples. Emergency response. I was visiting Thailand, 3.5 years ago when you had the last major flood, for example. Or there could be a hurricane. I go to the Philippines, they've had some hurricanes recently. So how do you coordinate the response to that? How do you connect with maybe communities that have been cut off by a disaster? How do you use maybe some intelligence from satellites or drones connected to vehicles or people with smart devices, and how do you put that all together to better respond, to understand what's going on, to identify the risk, maybe sending robots or other autonomous machines into high-risk areas, damaged buildings and things like that. How do you piece that together as a government to improve the response, to improve the safety of communities and the recovery operations? In the health scenario there, how do you connect up the medical devices with doctors' personal devices, with the building to know where people are in particular cases? One of the hospitals in Australia has a large cancer clinic. They were building a new building and they took the opportunity to redesign their workflow, the way they engage patients. As a patient comes in, they can do a whole lot of stuff online before to register. When a patient comes in, they're given an RFID tag to wear instead of just the plastic band that I used to have when I went to hospital, so that they can be tracked through the process. There's a workflow. It's all designed around the patient experience. So, they get moved through, they're automatically tracked. The results, the services, the doctors they need to talk to are all coordinated around the patient experience. And the building has sensors, the medical devices are wired up to integrate that experience for the patient. And smart cities. Street lights, video cameras, the BTS cameras and monitoring, parking spaces, location of services, emergency response, the smart cities that I'm sure you all have heard about as well. So this Internet of Things can play out in many different ways for government, and these are just a couple of very quick examples. In the dot points there, you might also see the crime detection and prevention. That's a big one for government. How do we identify risk, public risk, national security, those sorts of things are enabled in new ways by this. Let me just give you another way of thinking about this connection of the physical world and the virtual world. So if we go back, and this is digital business rather than digital government, but it's the same pattern. Back pre-2000, we had the web, we had the internet, we could email people, we could look up basic information that people published. Then the era of e-business came. We could actually transact. We could, go online to our bank and look up our balance. We could buy things online. Amazon was born. Then we moved into, in the last 10 years or so, this era of digital marketing. How do we use this to impact and engage citizens and customers? We're now at the point around this era where we're adding the things. We're adding the Internet of Things. We're connecting up the physical world, the machines and the assets and the homes and the hospitals, and that creates new opportunity. So that's what we say is digital business, when we connect the physical and the virtual, and we build on all the things that have gone before. Going forward, in the next 5 years, as those connections happen and those smart machines start to become more important, robotics and autonomous machines, learning computers like IBM's Watson, we see that adding, and we start to see autonomous business. So it's not just digital, but there'll be a lot of transactions that will be automated and able to make their own decisions. Not everything, but we'll see an impact of that coming. That has also implications for government. How do you regulate those things? Okay, e-government. E-government versus digital government. So I know, apologies Dr. Sack, because I know your definition of e-government is broader and it includes most of these elements. So I'm not trying to suggest that e-government is only the first part. But when people started this journey 10, 15 years ago, typically it started with e-government, following the e-commerce. How do we put stuff online? Then we talked about how do we join up government? How do we focus on the life events of citizens and have a more seamless service? Then we talked about open government. How do we make government more transparent, share the information, the open data things that we talked about? And then smart government. How does government kind of use this information and this data and these services to handle more complex issues about sustainability? Crossing boundaries as you approach the ASEAN economic community. How do you link that up across governments in the region to benefit citizens? So you can see at the bottom, e-government doesn't go away, it continues. So digital government kind of builds on all these layers. But we'd suggest to you that the digital government focus really assumes that some of those earlier layers have been in place, and now we're building around the information transparency, the engagement, and dealing with these more complex issues with government. I don't have time to go through these trends, but I just thought I'd flash them up for you around what are some of the technologies that are underpinning digital government from Gartner's view. So this is our top 10. So you can see the first four around this role of government engaging with citizens and industry and so forth. Digital workplaces. How will the workplaces of the future changing as we digitally enable them? Omni-channel citizen engagement. Omni meaning, across all the channels. So whether it's walking into an office, over the phone, over the web, across different departments. How do you link that up to engage seamlessly? Open data. Government citizen ID, electronic IDs to enable services. Thailand's in a much better place because you do have a national ID. I live in Singapore. Singapore has the national ID. I have the one number for my driver's license, for my tax, for everything. In Australia, I have a different number for my health record, my tax number. Everything is different because they don't have that single ID to link everything together. Connecting. What are the analytics that help connect up across government agencies? Scalable, the G Cloud, the government data centre. How do we make this scalable? Digital government platforms, government information networks, etc. And then the Internet of Everything we've touched on, web scale IT and cloud. So that's just a few things. I don't have time today, but you're welcome to kind of look into that further. And one of Gartner's tools is what we call a hype cycle. It's useful for decision makers because it lets you understand the relative maturity of particular trends and particular technologies. So I've highlighted in yellow, I hope it shows up, a couple of examples. Government shared services over there is more mature. It's kind of gone through the dip where people say, oh, it's all very hard to do, and now governments are working out, how to kind of make that work, where it's useful. If you go to the other extreme, we've got smart machines in government. Smart machines are at a very early stage, so there's a lot of risk in doing something at that early stage. Not many people have heard about it. If you think that's important, maybe you just want to monitor it for a little while or do a very small pilot, but it's very risky to put a lot of effort and energy into that. Near the top of the hype, everybody's excited about it, everybody thinks this will be the next solution to all our problems, is the Internet of Everything for government. So there's been a few references to it already. I've spoken about it. Everybody's talking about the Internet of Things. Right? It's at that top of that hype. It will go through the sort of disillusionment as we find out, well, it's not quite so simple and we can't just connect things. But eventually it will come through the curve and end up, being productive, and we'll know how to use it, we'll know how to keep it secure, et cetera, et cetera. So these sorts of, and we have many of these. This is just one quick example from Gartner resources around, how quickly will these technologies move and how do they follow this common pattern of technology maturity. Back to a couple of examples. Digital business and digital government. Let me start with manufacturing as an industry. Manufacturing is big industry in Thailand, so very relevant. If you look at GE, which is a big industrial conglomerate, what does digital mean for them? Digital means Internet of Things, putting sensors in their devices, in their products, connecting that in terms of analytics around the performance and around real-time monitoring, changing the manufacturing process through things like 3D printing. So if I take GE make jet engines for aircraft, I was in Bangkok a few weeks ago, read the paper. There's a story about an Australian university that has actually built with 3D printing, has 3D printed a jet engine. It's not full size for jumbo, but it's about 3 foot long, and it's not a model of a jet engine. It's an actual working jet engine that they've produced fully through 3D printing. So 3D printing isn't just plastic or paper. High strength, alloys, ceramics, concrete. Lots of things can be produced through what we call 3D printing. That could revolutionise supply chains and industrial manufacturing. What does that mean for government? If you look at the bottom, at a country level, we've got the German flag, the black, red and yellow. They have an initiative called Industry 4.0. We're saying we're moving into a fourth generation of industrial manufacturing and engineering, where these smart machines, where these computer connected manufacturing processes, 3D printing, modeling, virtual reality, all these things will transform the industrial sector, and it'll be like a fourth generation of industrial revolution. The German government is facilitating a program with the industry partners around what does that mean and how does Germany maintain its competitive position as an industrial, leading industrial economy with strong engineering skills, research and development, leading the world. So the government has a role partnering with industry to shape that aspect of digital economy. You're probably more familiar with Singapore. The IDA has some similar programs around innovation and partnering with industry, as well as some of their government services. I don't have time to go into a lot of detail. But that's an interesting one in Germany around the role of government from that digital economy perspective. Now, I won't go through all these in detail because time is very limited. But let me just go back to the health case. I talked about a hospital or a clinic being connected. We can kind of understand that. But in this case, we've got an elderly woman at home and has particular needs. She may have an illness that needs to be managed. Maybe she's a diabetic. If she has an insulin incident, with the machines that are behind her, maybe monitoring blood sugar and helping remotely connect to the clinic or the doctor or the emergency room, the response to her particular need can be much faster than having to get in her car and drive to the hospital or wait for an ambulance to arrive. Right, so that's just a very simple example. If you think before the bottom there, I mentioned about emergency response. How do you quickly gather information about the response within a few minutes rather than hours or days? Sorry to rush through these, but time's limited. So digital government can be many things. You need to think through, a little bit of the elephant, the big picture. What are the elements, and then what are the pieces that we need to build? Some of the foundations for success, as we talk to governments around the world in different parts, is digital practices, getting people used to this idea around operating in a digital world, providing the digital services, the mobile apps, the G-Cloud and those sorts of things. And then the digital channels, digitally enabling not just the online world, but also the office, the service centres. And we can think about digital as internal and external. And different initiatives will have a balance between, some will be more internal, the government data centre, for example. Others will be more external facing, enabling citizen engagement. One way to help you navigate some of the complexity is to think about the use cases that you're targeting. Someone who's job seeking, if you look at this matrix of social versus mobile, having access to a mobile app about job opportunities and how do I connect with those can be very useful. Whereas when I'm registering my land, that doesn't need to be quite so mobile or interactive. This slide's based on the Australian Government Interoperability Framework and the Australian Government Architecture Reference Model. And the Australian Government's done some great work in recent years around this whole idea of digital government and citizen engagement. So if you look in the centre is a group of citizens, a family, who has particular needs. With a young family, maybe their focus is on healthcare, education, employment, community services and transport if they may move into a new neighbourhood. So how does government understand that and connect with that for people? And thinking through these opportunities is part of the challenge of digital government. I emphasise the data part of digital government, and I'd like you to think about this notion that data and information is really the oil of the 21st century. Just as oil really drove the 20th century economy, the information and data will be driving the 21st century, digital economy. Just as crude oil out of the ground is not very useful, it needs to be refined, but then it can be turned into jet fuel, marine oil, diesel for trucks, oil for the engine, plastics, chemicals. Lots of things you can do with oil, but it needs to be refined. In raw form, it's very useless. The same with information and data. The cleverness is thinking through, how do we do that refining process and what's the end outcome we want from that? Also on the information side, remember when we talk about citizen information, government has part of the puzzle, but as an individual citizen, I have my own data. If I think about health, the official medical record that the health department might have is only a small part of my overall health story. If I wear a Fitbit monitor, or I'm monitoring my diet, or I go to a private clinic to have a health assessment, not all of that gets captured in the official record. As a citizen, I want to choose, how much of that I share and how I want to manage that collectively. So understand the role of government, where it stops and starts and where the grey areas are. Some of the roles that we see, Chief Information Officer traditionally had a lead role. We see the emergence of Chief Digital Officer in both government and commercial roles, and this separation of a Chief Technology Officer to implement, whereas the CIO is often involved in more the strategy and the business engagement. The Chief Information Security Officer is key because there's a lot of new digital risks that come in, particularly the Internet of Things, where those end sensors are not always secured well. So you need to think through that. We run a CEO survey annually, and we run a CIO survey. And last year, or this last cycle, we asked the same question to both. We said, who should lead digital business? The CIOs naturally said, 47% said, well, I should be the person doing that. That's obvious. The CEOs actually had a different view. The CEOs said most of the leadership should come from the CIO, but it's actually very shared. So the message from the CEOs is that digital is a team sport. I expect IT, finance, engineering, service delivery, marketing to play together to understand the opportunities and design the solutions and deliver value to our customers. That's the message from this slide. Success is a team sport, not an individual pursuit. And just as EGA has a role in facilitating certain aspects, the line agencies that many of you represent, have your role to play. The importance of partnership and connecting up is critical in this future. Digital's not about technology only. It's not about business change only. It's not about citizen behaviour only. You have to join up all of the aspects as a team. I'm going to skip that. Some of the management practices that we see happening. The orange, green and blue is a model we call pace layering. When we look at the solutions and the applications, traditionally it's sort of, we all approach them the same way. What we've observed is the people that do this well separate out those basic common commodity system of record, a finance system, an accounting system. They behave differently. We have a different investment approach, a different speed of change to the differentiation or the unique services around how do we engage citizens in healthcare. And then there's the innovation where we want to be doing new things and exploring the boundary that needs to be a little bit faster. I don't have time to go into the detail, but just think about as you approach these, which things need to be faster, which ones do we need to tolerate risk a little differently, and which are the ones that need a traditional, more stable approach. And we see these two modes, bimodal, two modes, becoming very common around traditional, stable, secure, and then kind of fast, innovative, agile. Let me close just by talking about risk. Traditionally, government has tended to focus on, what's the risk if we do this? You also need to think about what's the risk of not doing it. And at a broad level, Thailand's competitive advantage as a nation is influenced by your leadership and how you step up to the challenge. This isn't just about the government being more efficient. This can affect, how you engage with that industrial sector like Germany's doing. How do you provide a great citizen experience so Thailand's a great place to live for both your traditional citizens as well as migrant retirees or workers? So think about that. I won't go through the detail, the risk of doing and the risk of not doing. And I'd suggest to you that in the past we tended to think about high risk versus low risk. In a digital era, we should be thinking about what's a good risk versus what's a bad risk. And so the dimensions you think about will be a little bit different there. Our CEO survey was published 2 weeks ago today. we already have 22% of revenue directly attributed to digital services and products. CEOs expect that to increase almost double to 41% in the next few years. A lot of companies are changing their business model in a digital world, the way they develop products, the way they engage, the way they partner. Security is being recognised. Only 10%, but that's growing. The Internet of Things is seen as a big issue going forward, that both an opportunity and a risk. So the digital economy is here. It may be in an immature form, but it is here. The industry, the society that you serve are becoming digitally enabled. Some of those consumer things, if we think of from a digital economy point of view, do have impacts for government. I can't see the hands, but has anybody used Uber? I've used them a couple of times. Uber's this sort of car sharing idea, right? And if you followed this, you'll know that some governments have actually banned Uber and parts of their service because it cuts across the traditional taxi industry. You know, Uber drivers, when they launched, don't have to be registered like a taxi driver. They don't have to buy a license to operate. Right? Now, it's convenient from a consumer point of view, but how do you manage the risk and how do you regulate that as a government to balance up taxi drivers who spend a lot of money on their license and now their revenue's being threatened? But the consumers think it's great and convenient. Bitcoin. How does government manage financial transactions in virtual currencies rather than Thai baht or US dollar? Vessel is a really cool one. I'll just quickly mention it. It's actually like a cup. It's a smart cup. You put in your drink. It knows the difference between tea, coffee, orange juice, beer, Coca-Cola. It can even tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi. It analyzes the contents of that. It will tell you the sugar content, you know, how many calories. It will monitor through the day, connect to your smartphone, monitor, you know, how many drinks you've had during the day. Are you drinking enough? And give you all sorts of information. So I wanted to throw that in because that actually has some positives. Some of the others are a bit risky. This may actually have some positives as we promote healthy lifestyle. If people are getting that information to say, well, you've had 3 beers today, and that's, you know, too many calories, maybe tomorrow you should have a day off, or you're drinking too much coffee and that's not healthy for your heart. You know, maybe some of these consumer things will actually help us as we challenge with health outcomes for the community. Just a thought. A few recommendations you can lead through. You know, do explore, do look at the examples that are out there, learn from them, but they won't all apply. I'm very cautious coming from Singapore. Singapore's a small country. It can do things that aren't easy to do here. You know, they don't have remote communities. Right? They don't have a big population with such diversity. So they can do things, you can look at it, but not everything will translate. Do get independent advice, whether it's from Gartner or others, to navigate some of this complexity and risk. The outside in and the inside out, and the R's, you know, rethink the process, revise regulations, you know, respond to some of these changes and anticipate them, etc., etc. So with that, the final thought. When my children were young, you know, we'd go to the beach and they would love to play down near the edge of the waves, build a sandcastle. But they'd get so absorbed in what they were doing, building this nice sandcastle or digging a big hole, they wouldn't notice the tide changing and coming in. And the waves get closer, and eventually a big wave washes over their sandcastle and they come running up. Ah, my sandcastle. Don't be like that child, so absorbed in what you're doing now that you don't see the waves of change coming. Thank you very much for your attention and the opportunity to share with you, and I wish you success in your digital government journey. Jonathan Jon Kraue.